Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Iowa Gravel Series Podium Podcast. I'm your host, Chris McQueen, and like we always say, we have an amazing guest today. We have Brady Hopwood. We'll get into like where he's lived and where he's living now and things, but I've followed Brady a little bit because I saw his name showing up on a bunch of podiums in and around the area. And so I stalked him on Strava a little bit, and I was so excited to see that he showed up at one of our races recently. And so super excited to have him. Not surprised that he was on the podium at Silver City with some of his teammates. And so we'll get into that. Brady, it is so good to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This will be fun.
Yeah, I hope so. It's always fun for me because I feel like this is an opportunity for me to get to know these folks that are on the podium and doing cool things in cycling. So I think I mentioned to you, and I say this I think on a few of the episodes. I don't do my homework ahead of time.
Yeah.
I just let curiosity be the source of these conversations. So with that in mind, maybe we just kind of get off to a start here with just a little bit about who you are, where you grew up, and how you got into cycling.
Yeah. So I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska. I live in Omaha now. I moved here about a year ago. My girlfriend, she's from Omaha. That's the reason why I made the move here. Um, I don't have much of an endurance background. I played sports and things like that growing up. Um, no running or anything like that. Joined the Army right out of high school. So I'd like to think that's where I got some of my endurance from, but that was a while ago. So I'm 30 now. I got out when I was 21 and I left when I was 17. So I did about 4 years and then I started biking in the summer of 2020. So I'm pretty new to everything. Yeah, so I started in 2020, riding around on a single speed, and then probably a few months after that, I got a gravel bike, and then that was during the pandemic, so there weren't any races going on. But I had through Instagram, I was seeing things like Gravel Worlds and races that you were putting on and stuff like that, and slowly started getting deeper into the culture of gravel, and I was like, wow, this is really awesome. So the next year, 2021, I did my first gravel race, which was Solstice in Beatrice, and that was pretty eye-opening. It it was
Joe
probably
is
the hardest. Yeah, and it's that time of year too. It's so incredibly hot, and I missed a whole bunch, but slow each month I would learn a little bit more about training and fueling and things like that. Um, so yeah, I did that race and I was like, wow, this is super hard. Um, and then I think that same year I ended up doing Gravel Worlds. Uh, and that went pretty well. I finished, which that's all I really cared about at that time.
which distance did you do
I did the
the
150. Yeah.
150 at Gravel Worlds? Okay, yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm
So
guessing you did the 100K at Solstice as well.
the 100 mile, yeah.
Oh, the 100
So
mile, yeah.
I did the full. Yeah.
Oh, oops.
Oh,
Hold on one second. I want to make sure.
here.
Might have lost you there for a second. Go ahead and say that one more
I'll
time.
take the headphones out. Are you able to hear me? All right.
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so before Solstice, the first race, I listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of blogs online and things like that about how to train. So I just would ride a lot. And that's kind of how it all started. In the summer of 2020, I'd just be riding around with my girlfriend, going to like the farmer's market and stuff like that, like 10 miles, 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever. and then it slowly progressed. And I had some friends, I had a group of friends that we would all bike together, but nothing serious, just kind of locally on the trails in Lincoln. And then once I started learning about gravel, I was like, this seems like a lot of fun. And it was totally out of my realm. I had never done anything like that before. Long distance, anything. I actually hated running. I thought it was stupid. Anybody that ran, I thought it was totally dumb. I could never imagine doing it.
Well, that probably helped you qualify as a cyclist, from what I find. There's two types of cyclists: people that love cycling and people that broke themselves running and now have to cycle.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's a few more, but that's pretty common. So keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was in the Army, we would run almost every day. I was airborne infantryman, which is we do a lot of walking, patrols and things like that. So they had us running quite a bit, and after that, it just when I got out, I was like, never again. I'm not doing this anymore. So I basically just since high school, I was big into weightlifting, and for me, it was just like, let's try to get as big as humanly possible. And then I got into this sport, and it's like, well, you want to be really light, and it's all about, watts per kilo and all that fun stuff. So I ended up the summer of 2020, I was pretty thick and heavy because I was still lifting a lot and just eating as much as possible. And from that point, I've lost about like 25 pounds, just trying to get lighter on the bike and get faster. I mean, when you start doing these races, you realize, like, especially around here, there are a lot of good cyclists, really, really good cyclists. And it opened my eyes.
Well, let's back up then a little bit. I think you've given us a lot to kind of to go off of here. So you get out of the military fairly young, 21. I think of that as young anymore, apparently.
Yeah, no, yes.
Have you continued on to school? What do you do professionally?
Yeah, so I went to school in Bellevue, got my bachelor's there in business, and then I actually ended up getting a government job. That's where I work now. I work for Homeland Security, which sounds pretty cool, but I'm just working from home. It's nothing too crazy. I always joke about it when I tell people that I work for Homeland. They think it's like, I'm doing some pretty crazy and wild stuff, but it's nothing too crazy. But yeah, I love the job. I work from home, and it's a pretty flexible job. So for cycling, it's it works out great.
Awesome. But, okay, so you've got this flexibility to train. You've got you've got some discipline maybe that you got through the military a little bit, because I'm really impressed with this idea that you were big into weightlifting and then have shifted so much. So take me back a little bit to 2020, in that pandemic, and going to Joe Bilsbach's Solstice and doing that first race. What do you remember from had you actually accomplished or completed a 100-mile ride before you went and did that race? Were you like fully trained up for it? Did you feel like you were prepared, or were you kind of going into it like loosely trained, knowing that this was going to be something that pushed you?
Yeah. I mean, I was as well trained as I could have been, I think. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just riding. I had done centuries, probably just a couple, and it was like, an 8-hour day, but like 5 or 6 hours of riding. So it would be a lot of stops and things like that. Nowadays, it's not quite like that. I usually just try to knock it all out. But yeah. I had done a few before. I didn't really expect a lot. I just wanted to finish. That was really my only goal. And I knew I would get to the finish one way or the other. But yeah, I didn't really have any goals. I just went into it, just finished the thing, and and it didn't care about my performance or my finish time or anything like that.
You mentioned you rode with a few friends and with your girlfriend and everything. Were they with you on that first race, or was this something you kind of signed up for on your own, where you're like, I think I want to go do this?
No, I had totally pretty much done it on my own. I'd known a few guys. Actually, the week before that race, I had done my very first group ride, and that was with Rob. I don't know if you know Rob Finnegan, and I might be butchering his last name, but he's kind of like a local legend in Lincoln. He just rides like 40 hours a week. He's a madman. But I'm not sure if are you familiar with him at all?
That name sounds familiar. I don't yet know everybody in the gravel scene in the area. I'm trying real hard, but
He's
Rob
worth
and
a,
I maybe have interacted, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
he's worth a follow on Strava. He rides like 40 hours a week. He's just like every day is like a century plus. So he's a madman. He does all sorts of ultras and stuff. But I knew I was like, I need to learn how to ride in a group because I had never done it before, and I was super nervous and had no idea what to expect. And shout out to him, and he's probably done this a million times, and he probably doesn't think anything about it, but he was super welcoming and talking to me and kind of giving me tips and stuff like that and what to expect. And I really appreciate that. And I noticed that with this community a lot. Everyone's willing to, help you out. Like it's a really, really good community. So that gave me a lot of confidence doing that group ride, even though it was like 30 miles or whatever it was. But I was like, oh, okay. Like this is kind of how it'll work, just follow the wheel.
Mm-hmm. So you get on that race, and you're out on the course for the first time. Like, what will take us back to that day, that first race? Well,
Yeah.
was it something that you got out there and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with this? Did you stay with the pack? Did you kind of just do it your own speed? What was kind of your strategy getting
Yeah.
out there?
I don't think I really had a strategy, but I ended up staying with the pack, probably like I don't even know. It was like just, middle of the pack crew. And I don't think I ate anything the first like 2 or 3 hours. So I was hurting pretty bad towards the end. But yeah, I just tried to stick with the group, and then until the point where I couldn't possibly hang in there anymore. And it was just basically a struggle to get to the finish, a solo effort to the finish, trying to survive. It was extremely hot that day. Yeah, my body was hurting for sure, and I've learned a lot about nutrition since that day.
I was going to ask you, like, was that the big lesson from that first race that you took maybe into gravel worlds and everything? Was it like, okay, I got to fuel differently? Was that kind of your first lesson?
Totally. I was like trying to eat bars. It's like for me, when it's super hot, I can't consume a lot of solids. And you get everyone's experienced this that's done races and stuff like that. You kind of get to that point where your gut just rejects everything. So now in my training, I always try to hit, like 80 to 100 carbs per hour on almost every ride that I do now to kind of train my gut. But
What's your go-to right now in terms of nutrition to get those 80 to 100 grams of carb? Because it is hard. Like it's a full-time, it feels like the biggest part of the work sometimes is actually getting the nutrition in.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially at the start of a race, can be, I mean, depending on what it is, it can be kind of hectic. And when your heart rate's at like 170, the last thing you want to do is put something in your stomach. But yeah, right now it's usually I'll try to do like a bottle an hour with like a gel or two, and then maybe I'll throw in some like Cliff blocks and things like that. It's a lot of gels, liquids, and I'll do some like gummies and stuff like that. And then maybe I'll throw in a bar or two, depending on how long the race is. But yeah, for a race, I'll try to shoot for 100. And usually I fall a little bit short of that, but that's kind of my goal when I go out there.
Okay. Cool. What do you put in your bottle? Do you have a favorite brand, or are you mixing
Yeah.
something yourself?
Right now, I really like the Scratch high carb mix. It doesn't taste very good, but I mean, I'm just like at that point, I don't really care. But I like Goo too. Their Roctane. Um, it kind of depends on the time of year too. If it's super hot, I want to make sure I get like a lot of sodium and stuff like that. So I'll do the Scratch hydration mix too. So
Okay.
I like the high carb doesn't have as much sodium in it. Um, so it's I'm still messing around with it. So I like the goo gels and Scratch products quite a
I
bit.
feel like so much of athletics anymore is you have to enjoy the fun of the experimenting and like being your own guinea pig. Like at some point that has to be part of the fun of all this, because to usually accomplish goals, you're constantly having to adjust things.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I feel like my body every 5 to 10 years I have to refigure it out. And so yeah, I think figuring it out is a pretty consistent theme across everybody that I talk to, at least.
Yeah.
All right, so we've done solstice, we've learned a bit about nutrition, you've used a lot of that information so far to continue to fuel yourself, and you're continuing to train your gut that way, to keep that high performance. And that 80 to 100 grams of carb is pretty consistent on what I hear in podcasts and other things around what you need to do to really perform at those higher levels. But so take us to that first Gravel Worlds. You sign up. Is this again like a solo effort, or was there a group that was like, okay, you've done this, now we should all go and do Gravel Worlds? What was it going into Gravel Worlds, your goal there?
There was actually a guy, and I can't remember his name, but I met him at Solstice, and he had reached out to me and was like, "We should ride Gravel Worlds together." And at some point, the first like 20 miles, we ended up meeting up, and we rode quite a bit of it together. But that race, there's so many people that do that race, you end up finding a group anyways. But yeah, I pretty much did that one solo too. I have I've been meeting people, but it's not like I wasn't super close with anyone at that point, or like, hey, let's do this together and let's team up and finish it. And I'm also kind of at that point, I would have rather just done it by myself, if that makes sense. I know like drafting and things like that, super beneficial, but uh I don't know. I think it's like an added pressure if I'm like, man, this guy doesn't seem like he's sucking a whole lot and I'm dying over here. It's just, I don't know, going at my own pace, not having to worry about anyone else. But now things have changed quite a bit. Now it's like, I want to be in a group and work with a group. It makes things so much easier. But
I'm gonna make an assumption here. I didn't serve in the military, but I have people in my family, folks that I really respect, have served in the military. I love speaking about, and the military was always an option for me whenever it came to like graduating from high school, graduating from college, thinking about a career change. Until I got too old, it was always something that I'm like, oh, this could be interesting. Do you feel like, and this is just me reading into this, so I'm curious, do you feel like that hesitancy at first came out of just a wanting to feel like, you were part of the team, and you were actually supplying help and not being a burden, and then once you kind of knew what you were doing, you felt like you could, you know be part of the team and help and work together? If that's the case, I'm curious, like maybe when that point changed in your mind where you're like, okay, now I can be part of the team.
yeah, no, I I guess I never really thought about that, but that it totally makes sense. You never want to be like the weakest guy on the team or the guy holding everyone back. And I think, yeah, I would say that's definitely true. Yeah, that goes with everything. I've talked about this with people that are in my life. Like I just want to be the average guy. And when it comes to like my work, I'm just out here. I'm just surviving, you know. Um, and yeah, I think that's definitely true. I would have to agree with that.
Do you remember a point where you were suddenly like, was it the group rides that you were getting into that you're like, okay, I can hang and we should do this? Or was there a race after Gravel Worlds where you're like, okay, um, I'm gonna start being with the group and I'm gonna take my pulls because I know I can? Or so what
Yeah.
changed your confidence, I guess, is what I'm curious about. What kind of changed that mindset?
Would probably, I would say probably in 2022 when and that was kind of I had a decent enough knowledge to be like, okay, I need to be in the pack. If I want to have any kind of decent result, like I want to be in the pack. I want to mix it up with these guys that I see on Strava and, you know, all these fast guys. I want to be a part of that group. So I just took my training more seriously, and it's real. I'm kind of a data nerd, so I can see what I'm producing and what other people are producing. I'm like, well, I'm not like too terribly off from where they're at, and I think that probably is what gave me the confidence, is just seeing the improvement, and comparing myself to other people, which probably isn't the greatest thing, but I'm sure every cyclist does it. But yeah, I just was like, I think I could mix it up with these guys. Like I just need to train a little bit harder, or alter a few things, and lock down my diet a little bit more, and lose some weight, and yeah, maybe I could mix it up with those guys. But I
Okay,
don't
so
think specific time. It was probably in the winter of 21, and I'm like, you know what, next year I'm gonna like get after it, and I want to be in with that lead group.
well, I feel like you've definitely, you've come a long way in 4 years. I mean, if this is essentially your fourth season, and I've already seen you on podiums before, and you came in second or third at Silver City.
Third.
You
Yeah.
came in third, yeah. And I'm talking with Charles Erickson here
Yeah.
soon, who came at first
Cool.
at Silver City. I mean, it's not the hardest course in the world, but it's not an easy one.
Yeah.
And so anybody that can pull out a podium finish there is doing some good work, because we definitely have a more competitive field at that race than even some of our other ones. The so you're 2021, you're kind of taking it more seriously, and I know you've been on some cycling teams as well. So you were with Good Life for a while, and now you're on the Viking cycling team. Can you kind of tell me how that happened, that you suddenly became more than just a cyclist out there trying to do their best, to where maybe someone's saying, hey, we'd like you to race with us, and we want you to put our jersey on?
Yeah. Well, I wish it was them reaching out to me, but actually with Good Life, this is very, I mean, now they're like blowing up. They're kind of all over the place and doing all this, sending guys all over the country to do races and things like that. But there's a guy named Ryan Lipa. He's their bike mechanic, and he actually works. I think it's Shane Pede. He runs the team. He owns the business, and stuff like that. And Ryan, I saw they all had Good Life in their name on Strava, and I'm like, what is Good Life? This seems. And I had been interested in joining a team just to get in some group rides and get closer with the community. I'm not a super outgoing person, and but what's cool about this sport, something about this sport makes me want to be a part of the community and do group rides and meet new people. Yeah, so I reached out to Ryan, and he's just like, yeah, like you can join. I was like, okay, cool. And I joined, and yeah, I did like group rides and stuff, but that was like pretty much the start of Good Life. Nothing, I mean, now they've got so much stuff going on. So yeah, I joined them and did some group rides, and that was really cool. And then I moved to Omaha, and they pretty much do all their riding out of Lincoln. So and I don't go down there a lot, especially with cycling. it's such a time consuming sport anyways. I don't really have the time to drive down there, do a group ride, come back, and my girlfriend would hate me. I already take up way too much time biking. So Charles had reached out to me and told me about Viking Cycling Club, and I was like, yeah, I'm totally down, because it's the headquarters is right by my place where I live now in Omaha. So yeah, this is the first year of this club, and yeah, it's super cool. I didn't really know anybody here in Omaha, so it's a good way to meet people here, and that's really what I want to get out of it. I don't really expect any free stuff or things like that. I just want to meet people and do group rides and have fun, basically.
No, well, and I mean that's a good reason to join a team, and it is nice to have that collaboration. And so, had you ridden with Charles before? Is that how he kind of came to know you, from either in a race or events or some other group rides?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but it's all through Strava. I think I met David Holst, which
Yeah.
and then he ended up, I think he connected me with Charles. I had seen Charles at races, but they were so much better than me at that point. Like I wasn't like talking to them or anything like that. And then I think at some point we did David got us all connected and we did a group ride, and they're really easygoing guys, and so that's kind of where it got connected. So shout out to Charles for getting me on the team. He's the one, and I'm super happy he did. It's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, and David's been on a bunch of the races, and I believe on the podium a few times. I don't think I've actually gotten him on the podcast, although I should, because that was kind of a late development. And I actually believe that David's doing a bit of, well, maybe that's someone else. I was trying to think if David was doing more running this year than cycling. Maybe maybe
he just had a kid, so I think he's just kind of taken the year to focus on that. And how cycling, it's super time consuming, so I think he's just like, I'm gonna focus on running and staying in shape and stuff like that. But yeah, he's been doing a lot of running.
Yeah, and that's totally cool. That's actually one of the reasons why we've started adding running to our gravel series races. And not that we're probably the best running event in Iowa. I think shout out to the Iowa Trail Running Series. They go and do races out in all these parks out across Iowa. So if you're really into trail running, I definitely suggest you go check them out, because they actually know what they're doing in a lot of ways. We're trying to just add this as something that brings a race to these smaller towns that we end up with or end up being in the gravel world. So but yeah, whether it's running or whether it's biking, I think it's the cool thing is being able to get a group of people together and do something fun, but still have like the rest of your life or less the rest of your weekend to still do those. Okay, so you've joined the Viking Cycling League. We kind of learned some things from the first race around nutrition, and maybe through time, okay, now we need to work together. What are you learning right now? Like, what's the thing that's maybe at the top of your experimentation list that you're like, okay, these are the things that I'm trying to figure out more and more?
Yeah, so really right now what I'm focusing on is adding volume. Before when I was training, I was going out and I had no plan. I was just riding and riding hard, and I was basically just burning myself into the ground. And now it's more about I want high volume and then sprinkling in the intensity. And that's kind of my focus now. So I usually do 2 intensity days, and then the rest are all just endurance volume, trying to get long rides in. Especially this time of year, you really have to train in the heat, long hours in the heat, and train your gut, for those 5, 6, 7 hour races, whatever it might be. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. But it's constantly evolving for me. But right now, that's what I'm just like, I need to ride my bike a lot.
Is there something bigger that you've got planned? Like, what are some of your A races that you have for 2024?
Yeah. So Gravel Worlds for sure is one. That's later in the year. Right now, I'm focusing on Grounded, Nebraska. It's in Roca, so it's right outside Lincoln. It's a smaller race, which I like. You know, it gives me a chance to get on the podium. Possibly last year, actually, shockingly got on the podium. But yeah, that's one I'm focusing on. That's 100-mile, which last year it was 125. I'm kind of glad they knocked it down because it just so happened it always falls on a weekend where it's incredibly hot.
Yeah, because Grounded is late July, is it?
It's it's the 29th of June, I believe.
Oh, okay, late June. Okay.
Or I can have that totally. Let me look at it real quick. Because
I know Grounded has like this wonderful brand of inclusivity and being much more about, yes, podiums are important, but also I don't know if they would consider themselves fully like like an event or a festival, but I think they focus a lot on that, and they have amazing branding and everything. I haven't done Grounded. One of my challenges putting on so many races is I don't get to go to as many races as I want to. So there's some effort there on my part to get out and do some of these more. But this isn't your first time doing Grounded?
Yeah, I've actually done it. It's only been this will be its 3rd year, so I've done it each year. In any race that's that close, it's like, you know, I got to do it if I don't have anything going on. And it's definitely more my speed. Things are kind of changing now that I'm getting a little bit faster, but I'm wrestling with being really competitive and just going out there and having a fun time. And in the end, that's what I want, to have a fun time. And like Gravel Worlds now, I mean, I've only done it a handful of times, but it's definitely a totally different experience. Like, I don't go out there expecting to win. It's, you know, I know I'm not going to get on the podium. So it's more just like, you know, having fun and being happy with how I performed. Whereas like these other smaller races, it's, you know, maybe I could get a top 10 or a podium or, you know, whatever it might be.
So you've got Grounded, you've got Gravel Worlds, and that's kind of your A race. So what are anything else in the schedule that you plan on doing?
So I'll do Soldier Cutoff Hilduro. I love that one. That one is super fun. I did it for the first time last year, and I think it's one of my favorite routes I've ever done. I love that race. So
thank you. It is, like, I shouldn't have favorites, but definitely Pisgah, Soldier Cutoff Hilduro is one of my favorites. Take me through, because I'd forgotten that you were there last year. Take me through what your day was like on that course.
Well, that course doesn't necessarily suit me very well. Like, Silver City's great because it's just rolling hills, and for a guy like me, it's just, you know, steady power, short climbs, steady power, pedal hard. The other race is like a lot more climbing, but it's so fun. The B roads are a blast. I think I got dropped the first, I don't know, mile 10 or something, one of those climbs, and I was pretty much out solo the rest of the race. I think I don't know where the photographer was set up on that B road, whatever climb that was. I actually had to walk that, and I told him to wait. There's a picture of me, and I was like, "Don't take a picture of me walking this." So I remounted, got back on the bike, and then finished it. But
I do remember that picture because, yes, there were very few people. So there's one hill that's infamous, and I love it, and I tell this story all the time. If anybody's listening to the podcast, they're probably bored of it. But you go up 138th, and you turn onto this B road. It's called Fulton, and the 138th is already a fairly steep hill. I'm sure it's pushing more like 8%, maybe even 10 already. But then the B road that you turn off on Fulton, just like it just goes up, it just kicks it up another like 12%, or up to 12%. And then you make this kind of sharp right-hand turn, and it's even steeper. Like it's so mean.
I learned a good lesson. I mean, that every race I learned something from, but that one specifically, it's like, okay, I need to do some more route recon. I need to like write down the major climbs and make, because I think before that I was just hammering. I wasn't preparing for an epic climb, that I'm not used to. So my legs were shot before I even got there. But yeah, good lesson learned there.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of cool. I think this is a fairly natural progression that I think people have in cycling. I think, you got to figure out the nutrition. Like you're going to really struggle if you can't figure out the nutrition early on in your in racing, or even just in being able to enjoy the ride. You got to figure out how to fuel for bigger efforts, and then figuring out how you train and what you train to keep your body performing, but not also destroying that body. I definitely know in my 30s, I was commuting back and forth to work. That was my workout on the bike, but I would go hard every time, and I'd have a lot of fun, but I wasn't gaining any fitness. I wasn't gaining really any speed per se. It was almost luck if I was getting more fitness, because I was spending it as fast as I was gaining it. And then I think that recon, really like knowing, okay, or how to work with a group is so critical. It is a team sport. Like we can think of gravel cycling as much as we want as being a little bit more like a running race style of cycling here in the US, that versus what you have with, say, the Tour de France or these bigger efforts in Europe. But in the end, you're gonna do a lot better if you can work with a group up until those more strategic points when it's time to make a decision. And then it's those are key moments. You either find a moment that you can break away and then sustain that breakaway, or you stick with that group and hope that you've got some sort of sprinting ability at the end. But again, it probably comes back to that knowing the course and the recon and the group that you're around with. So maybe kind of as our wrap up here a little bit, any recent story of where you felt like either you did a great job of finding that strategic moment, or maybe you noticed someone else who found a really great strategic moment on a race, and you're like, oh, that person did it. I didn't think it would happen, but it happened.
Yeah, I mean, every race I'm learning something. Every race, like I'm always watching, especially the experienced guys. I'm constantly just seeing what they do. Like if the wind's coming from a certain direction, what side are they drafting on? And usually they're pretty. If you just ask them, they'll talk to you. I know you had John. I'm gonna butcher his last name. Rocky Roque.
Oh, Rocky, John Rocky. Yeah.
Rocky. Yeah. I did a race with him earlier this year, and he probably didn't think anything of it, but it was a super windy race. And he was kind of telling me, like, get on this side of me so I could draft, but like he was helping me out. And he didn't need to do that. And he probably, but I really appreciate it. I'm soaking in things that these guys are doing all the time. But I'm trying to think. I know at Silver City, it was kind of interesting because Charles took off at like mile 1, and then I'm trying to think of towards the end of that race. It was me and 3 guys, and we were kind of like nobody really wanted to work too hard because we knew we had those 2 final climbs. So it was kind of fun playing a little tactics there before those last 2 climbs. And I'd like to think that I played my tactics well. I mean, at least I got, 3rd, which is good for me. But man, I don't know if I have any awesome like tips or anything like that. Just
Well,
try to
like,
conserve when you can, and if if you think you have the legs for it, throw an attack in if you want. But
how much? Maybe this is a good question. Then is how much do you think anymore as you get, and ending up at least in the races like the Iowa Gravel Series, you're ending up in that lead group. How much more of it is of doing well on a race is the tactical versus the straight up physical training? Like how for you where you're at, how much of it is it like being strategically in the right place versus just having the bigger engine, and so it's
yeah,
gonna end up
I
the
don't
way it's gonna end up.
with this. I would say right now it's probably tactically. Um, and I say that because I don't, if you're in the right place at the right time, you can make the moves quicker. So like, for example, when Charles took off at mile 1, I was like 6 bike links back. It would have taken me such a ginormous effort to even come close to, because at the point that he took off, maybe if I was closer up, I could have went with him. But because I was so far back, so it's always, I think, yeah, I think it's tactical. It's everything. I need a little bit of everything, but I would say if you're lacking in one, if you play it tactically well, you definitely. I think there's a lot of people that maybe aren't as strong but tactically sound, and they have a lot of experience, so they just happen to be at the right spot at the right time. And I'm not quite, I don't know where I fall in, uh, I'm still learning so much, and yeah.
Well, if you're learning from folks like John Rocky, you're definitely tactically putting yourself in the good place, because there, like you said, there are so many wonderful cyclists in the Omaha plus the greater Iowa region that it's so much fun to be part of this experience and to see folks like you, in a fairly short amount of time, go from I don't know anything about this to hey,
Yeah.
I ended up on a mediocre podcast hosted by a guy who doesn't do his research at all.
Yeah, so pro already.
Yeah, so pro. Well, Brady, this has been fantastic to get to know you a little bit. I certainly hope that we get you back on the podium here
Yeah.
soon so that we can have follow-up conversations and learn more with you and from you. So thank you so much for your time today. This has been great.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me on, and thanks for throwing on all these races. It's seriously like the highlight of my year. I love your races. They're the perfect distance for a guy like me, and I learned so much from them. So I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me on. This has been super fun.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, we'll catch you soon.
All right, thank you.